Guild Wars, Sea of Sorrows. Chapter 16. A bitter wind swept fiercely over the open sea, driving the waves beneath it. The gale chased them through the broken shards of islands, over washed, thin beaches and high coral reefs, giving the tide no quarter. Between the rocky fragments, two ships hove into view. One was small, a lightweight pinnace with rippling, strangely rigged sails. The other was larger, damaged, lumbering like an old and weary man. The Pride and the Salma's Grace. They left behind the waterways that threaded amid towering lumps of stone, sailing with desperate speed through narrow straits. A shadow spread through the wreckage in their wake, but too slowly to catch the ships once they reached the open sea. Some of the whites made it aboard, but between the eager Norn and the vicious Char, none survived long enough to impede the ship's escape. "Too bad we didn't get to go aboard," Bronn grumped to his brother as he cleaned rotten flesh from the edge of his sword. Grim nodded in agreement, and the bearded Norn continued. "Could have learned a lot from poking about on that Orion tub." "Learned?" Old Grist cocked his head, his yellowy eyes glittering with suspicion. "What are you? Some kind of scholars or something?" "You could say that," Grim answered the gray-furred Char. "My name's Grim Sviard. This is my brother, Bronn. We're explorers for the Priory. We wanted passage on the Sea of Sorrows, and King Bade offered to pay if we'd keep an eye on his gold. Learning all we can about these Aryans. That's our real mission." "The Derman Priory?" grumped Grist. "I've heard of you lot. Refugees from Lion's Arch, hiding up there in the mountains with salvaged books and things. Odds and ends. What are you out here to learn?" Bronn sheathed his greatsword in a scabbard across his back. "How to kill them all. That's one thing we can agree on," said the rugged old Char with a smile. Both ships remained under full sail as anxious sailors watched the ring of fire islands fall back against the horizon. And, long before nightfall, vanish from view. Once the ships were out of danger, they slowed and pulled side by side. Sails were furled, ropes were thrown between them, and the planks were placed to allow free passage from one ship to the other. Sailors shook hands and congratulated one another on their victory, relishing the fact that they'd lived through a hard-won battle. Kobaya paused once again to touch the little doll in his pocket, thanking the gods, and his watchful angel, that his life had once again been spared. Through all the horrors he had witnessed, and all the dangers he had faced, it was more than his crew that stood with him. He could feel Biviane's presence as well. "So, Kobaya," Captain Moran interrupted his reverie, reaching to shake his hand. "I suppose this is goodbye." "Goodbye to you, sir." Kobaya winked and clasped the old captain's hand, but not to that Creodan gold. The grizzled old captain grimaced stubbornly, but after a moment, the frown faded and he sighed. "You're right. We made a deal, and I won't shine you out of it after you and yours saved our lives. You could have left us for dead, and fighting with us is more than most would have done in your place." He ran a hand through his short gray hair and sighed again. "I'll tell King Bade you held me at sword point and spirited away the fortune. He's already got his Azura Gate. It's the colleges of Radasum who are out a pretty penny. Don't underestimate the Asuran capacity to pass the buck, Captain," Matcha said. She stood on the board between the ships, waiting to greet Kobaya. "Your king's in for an earful." Moran laughed. "I suppose you're right, little one." "Little," she huffed. "I may be little, but I'll have you know I'm the one who tracked your ship. I conjectured the mathematics of your speed and the latitude of Rata Sum versus the longitude of your port of origin at Port Noble. If it hadn't been for me—" "Ah, so we can blame the Asura," Moran interrupted, eyes twinkling. Her eyes bulging with annoyance, Matcha protested. "That's not what I said!" But her words were drowned out by the laughter of the crew. "Fine. She put her hands on her hips in defiant pride. But if you pass that on, be sure to tell them that my invention will revolutionize sailing forever. She hopped up and down on the board for emphasis, and it creaked dangerously. Sycox quickly scooped the Asura up and hoisted her aboard the galleon before the plank could break and dump her into the sea. Kobaya's eyes were irresistibly drawn to the figure standing at the rear of his cheering crew. Sae, the wind blew her dark hair in loose strands about her face and shoulders as her hazel eyes found his. Before Kobaya could call out to her, Henst thumped his way across the planks and strode to Isaiah's side. The Ascalonian hugged Isaiah closely, thumping her back in relief and telling her of their side of the battle in loud, too eager tones. Kobaya was relieved to see that her greeting in return was significantly less enthusiastic. They were friends then, not. Kobaya suddenly noted a dried stain of blood on Isaiah's shirt. "You're injured?" Kobaya strode across the planks to her side. "One of the Harbinger's deck guns hit our rear quarter. It splintered the wood, and a piece of flying board caught my side." Stepping closer to Kobaya, Isai lifted the edge of her shirt to show him the wound. It had already been wrapped in a thin bandage of canvas and showed no sign of seepage. Lowering her shirt, Isai reached out and put her arms around Kobaya's neck and hugged him in a gesture much warmer than the one she'd given Henst. Kobaya grinned smugly at the Ascalonian's surly glare. "I'm glad you're all right, Kobe," Isai said quietly. "I tried not to let them shoot up your ship. We just weren't fast enough." Kobaya breathed in the scent of her hair and felt her warmth against him. "It's all right. The Pride will manage. Scars give her character." He looked down and placed his forehead against hers in a gentle gesture. "I'm sorry." "Me too." Isai gave him a smile of relief. When she slid out of his arms, she kept her hand on his, twining Kobaya's fingers with her own. Laughter bellowed among the burly char, transferring 4 chests of coin from one ship to the other. Kobaya saw Asam and Fasher struggling to carry one across the planking, arguing about how much weight the board would bear. Fasher had taken the Creadan flag from the Salma's Grace, draping it over his shoulders like a king's cloak. "Look at all this gold," he announced, thumping the side of the chest. They set it down on the Pride's deck and pulled open the lid to show a wealth of shining gold. Fasher raked his claw through the coins covetously. "How do we split it up, Captain?" "That's Creadan gold." Isai sobered, staring darkly at the 4 iron-banded chests. "First," Kobaya said, "a share to Isai and her crew. Enough that they can buy a ship of their own and get the heck off ours." He chuckled lightheartedly. Virid studied his staff as if it contained something more interesting than gold. Henst frowned and looked toward Isai. "No, I can't," Isai protested. "I won't make a profit on Creadan gold." "Isai," Kobaya said to her before she could go on, "when the Harbinger attacked, you and your friends risked their lives to save ours. You could have left us on the Grace, but you stayed to fight. I know you weren't in favor of robbing King Bade's vessel, but I want to reward you for that courage, at least. Take a share of the money and give it to the people of Creata. That way, if the king taxes them again, they'll have plenty of extra to give him without hurting themselves." Isai brightened, her eyes widening. "You mean it?" He nodded, and she hugged him again in gratitude. "I'll do just that. If you're headed to Creata, we can take you there, miss." Captain Moran gave her a stiff sort of bow, prompting Isai to manage an awkward curtsy in return. "Assuming Captain Kobaya permits the Grace to sail home after he's finished looting our hold." Moran's tone was sober, but his gray eyes twinkled with mild amusement. "If I'm keeping the flag, snub nose." Fasher's tone seethed with suspicion. "Wasn't the flag I was after," Moran said evenly. "Mariner, I'm looking to allow any sailors who want to disembark from the Grace and sail to another port with you." Once the tale gets out in Divinity's Reach that we've been fighting beside pirates and Char, some of them won't be welcome home again, no matter what the reasons. Me, I'm a mad old coot. I can get away with anything. But some of these boys are mighty young to have the stain of it on their reputations. It's more of a stain to fight beside Char than it is to be sunk by a dead ship? Grist shook his grizzled head. Scornfully, he snorted. Ridiculous humans. I'm sure Captain Mariner will make them welcome on the Pride. Isay smiled, ignoring the Char's jibe. Kobaya gave the gray-haired Cryadan a solemn nod. As for your other offer, she said, thank you, Captain Moran, but no. Henst and the others might take you up on the ride, but as for me… She looked up at Kobaya. Once I finish distributing the gold, I'd like to remain aboard the Pride. If they'll have me. This ship could use a good pilot. Indeed, we could. Joy swelled Kobaya's heart. You're welcome to stay among us, I sigh. In the background, Kobaya heard Matcha's snort of derision and Fasher's sly snicker, and ignored them both. I'll stay as well, Virid murmured, pushing a curtain of reddish hair out of his eyes. Isay's been a good friend to me. I prefer to work in her company. Kobaya met the elementalist's eyes and nodded gratefully. Me too, I guess, Henst added with a surly grimace. Although Kobaya knew the man was nothing but trouble, Henst had pulled his weight aboard the Grace when he was needed most. Kobaya nodded again, perhaps a bit less gratefully. So what about the gold? Fasher belligerently crossed his arms. That still doesn't tell us what the split's going to be. There's enough money here to pay for 5 vessels the size of the Pride, or to carve your grinning face on a mountain if you wanted. We could buy an surrogate, Assam teased. Or acquire a laboratory the size of a palace and build a gate of our own. Matcha managed a grumpy smile, and Sycox thumped her shoulder, nearly knocking the little Asura over in amusement. We could buy gold-plated pistols and swords with diamond-studded hilts. Fasher guffawed. Old Grist whistled at the thought. Or we could build a city, Kobaya added. Exactly. Well, a town, maybe. We could call it Port Kopaya. Sycox's laughter died as he noticed the solemn look on his captain's face. You're not kidding. No, I'm not. Kobaya leapt onto the high step of the quarterdeck and called the crew to attention. Sailors of the Pride, he shouted over their enthusiastic banter. Today, you not only bested King Bade's finest ship of the line, you also made history. Together with the fine men and women of the Salma's Grace, we achieved something never done before. We sank an Orion ship. The celebration shouts from the crew drowned out his voice as they roared in approval. Kobaya raised his hands, calming them again. Everyone said it was impossible. They said the dead ships are unbeatable, that the plague of undead assaulting us was as unstoppable as the tsunami that brought them to our shores. That the only thing we could do was run away. Well, no more. He looked down at his crew proudly. Eager faces shouted and called his name, but he felt the most pride simply looking into a single pair of hazel eyes. Our ship stood against every one of the Harbinger's weapons, guns, magic, and more. And we didn't just survive. We won. A great cheer went up among the assembled crew. Some of the Char shot their pistols into the air, roaring their approval, and even Matcha smiled. Settle down, Kobaya chuckled. It's a victory, and a big one. But it's not enough. They call the beast an aura dragon. A big one, like the tales of Primordus from my grandfather's time. When that monster rose from the sea, it took Lion's Arch from us. Since then, it's ravaged a dozen other towns along the shore. What's next? Rata Sum? Port Noble? The Tarnished Coast or the Eastern Shores? Well, I say, Or's tyranny stops today. We draw the line with the fall of Port Stalwart. First Mate Fasher's right. We could use this money to live comfortable lives for a year or more. Maybe even longer. But I have a better idea, I say. Kobaya took a deep breath and plunged onward. I say, we build a port of our own. We build it, and we defend it against R. We make it a free port, not beholden to any nation, open to anyone who sails the sea. We'll teach others how to fight against the dead ships, using char weaponry, Asarane innovation, and human courage. All that, eh? Someone bellowed from the crowd. What about the Norn? Braun stepped forward with a teasing grin. Sounds like you're building a place of adventure. Is there some reason you'd keep our people out of this mercenary utopia you're proposing? Not at all, Kobaya laughed. The Norn would be welcome. You, he said, would be welcome. We promised King Bade that we'd stick close to his gold. You won it from Moran fair and square, but that doesn't release us from our promise. Grim shook his armored fist at Kobaya. You'd not be asking us to break an oath, now, would you? No. Kobaya pretended to fend him off as the gathered sailors laughed uproariously. The port would be open to any and all, so long as they'll fight against Or and help to keep our waters clear. Braun and Grim smiled, nodding to each other in satisfaction. When the cheering died down a bit, a surly voice shouted, Where will you build this mythical free city, Kobaya? On the King's land? Or are you planning to conquer part of the Asaran coast? No, Henst. Kobaya guessed the speaker without seeing him. We'll build it in a place nobody else wanted. A site that's been abandoned, left as wreckage, a place that's just waiting for us to return and give it life again. Enjoying the drama of the moment, Kobaya pointed to the northeast. We'll build our port on the ruins of Lion's Arch. Lion's Arch? Fasher blinked. That city's drowned. Covered in water? As Isaye can tell you, the tide's been going down over the last few years, Kobaya explained. If we built farther back and used the cliffs as protection for the town, the ruins in the harbor could even be part of our defense against the dead ships. Isaye considered Kobaya's words seriously, running a hand through her dark hair as she spoke. The tides in that harbor are still unpredictable. Ships would have to go very slowly sailing in and out, or they'd break their keels on the stone remains below the waterline. That's exactly what I mean, he agreed. That would slow down any Aryan vessel that tried to sail there, just like the corridors of the Ring of Fire Islands gave us an advantage here. That slow approach would be to our favor. We could put bulwark guns back on the cliffside, maybe even outfit the island at the harbor mouth with a defensive barricade of some sort. The port could employ tugboats to guide bigger vessels through the ruins. It's the perfect place to make a stand against the ships of Or, and most of all, it would give people hope. Not just the hope that we can survive the dead ships, but that we can come back from all this destruction and thrive. Kobaya called to them. I know it sounds like a lot of work. I know it'd be easier to just take the money and enjoy ourselves. But that's short-term thinking. We can defeat the dead ships and we can show the horrors of Or that we're done hiding from them. But to do that, we need a safe harbor. We need Lion's Arch. Tyria, he said more quietly, needs Lion's Arch. Isaye beamed up at him with pride. I'm with you, she said firmly. He smiled and pulled her close, looking toward the gathered crew. Me too, Sikok said brightly. It sounds fun. One by one, the other char of the warband nodded, adding their voices to the throng. I guess we can't be pirates forever, Fasher sighed. Even if we want to be? Grumped Matcha in return. But underneath her knitted brows, the corners of her lips twisted into a smile. Kobaya breathed a sigh of relief. So, are we agreed? All those in favor of rebuilding Lion's Arch? The cheers erupting from the crew were all the answer he required.